So I want to have a conversation about el mundo bueno and el mundo malo, which are two concepts that they speak about in the book, The Fifth Sacred Thing, written by Starhawk. For those of you who have never read The Fifth Sacred Thing, I highly recommend that you read that book, especially in the times that we are in right now. And specifically in this moment, I want to talk about what one of the main characters, Maya, one of the elders in the community from the Fifth Sacred Thing, speaks about is the difference between el mundo bueno and el mundo malo. And I apologize for any grammatical or pronunciation errors. I do not have experience speaking Spanish nearly as much as I do in French. That being said, so this idea and this perspective has been coming up a lot for me, and it's also been coming up in my coaching sessions with clients lately, where el mundo bueno and el mundo malo are both the good world and the bad world. And the good world and the bad world exist just a very thin film away from each other. On one side is the good world, on one side is the bad world, and there's a film in between that separates them. Another way that you could say it is that it's the place where water meets air, where if you're in a body of water, the good world is on one side and the bad world is just on the other side of that separation between water. And the difference between the two is that the good world, for example, let's say you're walking down the street like I am, and there's this car that winds up tearing around the bend. And in the good world, the car winds up missing me. I don't get hit. It was a close call, but I'm safe. And then in el mundo malo, in the bad world, the same car comes screeching around the side of the corner and I get hit. And these different circumstances where when something happens in the world, there are these multiple different realities that could play out that would generate different outcomes. And so much of what determines whether or not we are in el mundo bueno or el mundo malo is what we are choosing to place our attention on, what we are choosing to believe in. Am I operating in a good world, in a loving world? Am I choosing belief systems that support and embody the vibration of love, what is possible? Or am I defaulting and relaxing into the bad world, which she would describe as having a pessimistic attitude in life, or doubting in the goodness of life, or allowing for fear or scarcity or bitterness or resentment to cloud our perception of the world, so that our whole world gets colored by this. It makes me think of Albert Einstein's quote. Something I'll paraphrase is that one of the most important decisions you can make is whether or not you live in a benevolent or an evil universe. And, in the book, The Fifth Sacred Thing, Maya is speaking about how easy it is to slip into the bad world, into the world where it is likely that bad things will happen, that bad luck does occur. And it requires such presence and such choice in every moment to choose, what world am I going to place my belief in? What world am I going to place my attention in? And there's something confronting about that, because it requires us to become actively engaged in the cultivation of the world that we want to believe in, that we want to live in. And there's something confronting about that, about how we have choice. And if we go into autopilot, it's quite possible that we might slip into the bad world and just mistake that as that's just what's true and that there's no other option. However, what she also acknowledges, which is important, is that even if we do slip into the bad world, that el mundo bueno is right on the other side. That no matter how deep we get into el mundo malo, into the bad world, the world of fear and worst case scenarios and uncertainty. Well, all the world is uncertainty. We never really know. But that no matter how deep we get into the bad world, that there's always the opportunity to choose to come back into El Mundo Bueno, into the good world, into the vibration of love and trust and belief that something better is possible, even when all we can see is darkness. And that's important for us right now. One of the things I've been speaking about, with friends and also with clients is just this energetic that I've been feeling in the collective that in some way is sending the message that it is not okay for us to be in joy right now. And from one perspective, I understand the sentiment in that, because we don't want to be in joy at the expense of connection and awareness of the suffering in the world. Because if that's our definition of joy, then that's not actually joy. That's ignorance. That's bypassing. It's important for us to be present to the suffering in the world right now. Because if I forget who did the quote, but if one of us is not free, then none of us are free. So this inviting to acknowledge the greater and deeper and vaster ways that we are all connected. And even if we aren't directly or consciously experiencing suffering to our direct perception, that does not mean that we are not being impacted by the suffering of others. And the lack of feeling of the suffering of others, more than anything, is just a demonstration of our own desensitization and numbness. I just ate a chocolate chip cookie, so I noticed that I had some chocolate chip cookie on me. I digress, though. So, true joy, willingness to feel the joy and the aliveness of life, not despite what is happening in the world right now, but because of it. I am choosing to practice seeing, feeling, and opting into El Mundo Bueno, into the good world, into the existence of joy, with the awareness that there is also suffering that exists within the world. Because in me choosing to believe in joy, it holds a space for inviting more people into the experience of joy. If we are not holding and embodying the vision of what we desire in this world, there's no way that it can manifest. We must be willing to do the work of coming deeply into our bodies, being willing to feel our sadness and our suffering, so that when we choose joy, that when we choose happiness, from that place of being connected to deep sorrow and the suffering that goes on in the world, that we know that that choice is actually part of the antidote, part of the healing solve, because that joy is connective. That joy is, and that happiness is connective, as opposed to pushing away suffering. It's actually inviting connection and creating more space and more energetic weight in El Mundo Bueno. Because if we opt into the belief of, well, what power do I have? I'm just one person. If every person makes a choice that in as many little ways or big ways in your life that you decide to opt in to El Mundo Bueno, to believing that this world is that this universe is an inherently good and loving place. And even if we don't see it, it begins with believing it, thinking it, and operating as though it is so, until the universe is required to reflect that, because that is what you choose to believe. It begins as a belief within us. And the world shapes to accommodate that belief. Because it must. Because it is natural law. May you be blessed. May your hearts feel levity and spaciousness and openness to what is possible. And I'll talk to you soon.